And welcome to a football show on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Sinkers Beverages, a winner of the Nashville Scene Best Craft Brews. And Sinkers Beverages has all of your beverage needs. And after what was a great football weekend, I'm sure there's a lot of needs for Sinkers Beverages, and there probably was a lot of need for Sinkers Beverages going into the weekend. And by Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, bringing that Texas barbecue into the B&A. In for Braden Gall, Jared Stillman, Paul Kuharsky here for a football show. Paulie, how you doing?
Greetings. I am well. Thank you for sitting in again. I believe Braden is coming back from his trip of luxury this afternoon, and then we'll fight some jet lag, and then we'll return to not taking any more vacations during football season, like normal people who cover football.
I have to be honest with you. I thought Braden was back. So when you texted me, hey, football show, I was like, oh, I thought Braden was back. I guess he's not. And yesterday you tweeted out that we were going to be doing the show in the afternoon. And then I had an issue with my son. So I want to appreciate Paulie for moving it to 9 o'clock. Not all a black hole where that heart is supposed to be. In one
easily done. Flexible. Tuesday morning's a good time for a show. So here we go.
Okay, let's start with topic number one, and it comes from what I think is the big topic in town, and there was a tweet yesterday from one Paul Kuharsky, at Paul Kuharsky NFL, saying, quote, lots of talk about local media panic over Cam Ward. Don't lump me in, Paulie said. 7 games far too early for a judgment. Paul then had a little piece from his story at paulkuharsky.com about Drake May and how Drake May kind of stunk last year, and now Drake May looks really, really good. So, PK, let's have the Cam Ward discussion.
Well, I mean, look, he stinks right now overall. This game of stinking was really about the 2 moments. Just dropping the ball for the second game in a row is utterly ridiculous. And it looks like, if you were doing a parody on Saturday Night Live of bad quarterbacking, you'd have a quarterback who couldn't cock the ball without dropping it. And then these interceptions, people on the other extreme want to defend him by complaining about the receivers who can't reach back. I mean, that's an extreme reach back for Chig. He's throwing way too many balls behind guys that are turning into problems and interceptions. And that throw to Chigakonkwo is not satisfactory and turns into a problem. The record is what the record is. The throws are what the throws are. I do think if you're looking at Cam Ward, and we know it's been bad, this is not something I say. Outside of those 2 plays, his game was much better. Best passer rating he had, second best yardage, best yards per attempt. The kind of slow growth that those of us who are patient and reasonable about a young quarterback you want to see. Now, he has to clean up the absolute stupidity. But rare is the quarterback that comes in and is guns a-blazing. And some of those guys, Stroud, Daniels, are having poor campaigns after that. So I think you just have to wait. We don't like to wait on anything. We have to wait. And he's going to have a second-year coach and coordinator next year, much the way that Drake May has now. I don't think he's going to get Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, but he's going to have better than he has now.
So I think he's going to be a bust. And it's not so much about the 7 games as much as it is about what I thought of Cam Ward going into the draft in this season, and how I feel like what I have seen has confirmed what I thought about Cam Ward. And I don't trust the organization to get it right around him. You brought up he's going to have a new coach next year. He's going to have a new OC next year, but it won't be Vrabel and McDaniels. So I'm supposed to believe Chad Brinker is going to find the next good head coach or the next good OC to really corral Cam Ward's talent. And so here are kind of my points, Paul, about why I think he's going to be a bust. And you tell me after I list out these points if you think it is fair to have this opinion or not. Number one, I'm not sure Cam was that good of a prospect going into the draft. I think he was a first-round talent, but not a traditional first overall talent. I think him as a prospect is closer to Will Levis than it was to Joe Burrow or John Elway or Peyton Manning, the traditional 1-1 quarterback who you don't trade away. I think Drake May, who went third in his own draft, was a much better and highly thought of prospect than Cam Ward was. Number two, his biggest problem is accuracy. And with the exception of Josh Allen, not a lot of quarterbacks become significantly more accurate throughout the course of their NFL career. And third, the organization is a dumpster fire. The owner fires everybody every 5 minutes. What she values is not success or winning, it's kissing her ass. And on top of it, the picks that they need to kind of develop the team, at least as of right now, they don't have to be able to give him better receivers and better pass rushers and a better team around him. Because, right, I mean, you went over the list. They need at the end of the year, 2 corners, 2 pass rushers, a receiver, a tight end, a
running back.
They're going to need everything. Yeah. So I list all that together and I'm like, yep, he's going to be a bust. He may end up being like a player that goes somewhere else and plays well down the road. But as far as what, you can trade that out and go get that in any offseason. As far as what Titans fans, he's Mahomes, Jared. He's not going to be that.
No, he's not Mahomes. Look how calmly you can present points when you're talking to somebody else. This is the reason why you need to be in a 2-person show. Cam as a prospect is not Joe Burrow or Manning or any of these guys that were 1-1s. That's completely fair. But they don't need him to be the best quarterback in the league. They need a guy who can start for them for 5 or 6 years minimally and be a guy who's a top 15 or 12 quarterback. Is that the ideal scenario for the first overall pick in the draft? No. Does it settle down your franchise and give you somebody that can lead you and be effective? Yes. So that's to your first point. And can he be that? I believe he can. Talking to football people, they believe he can. Looking at the best of him, which is what obviously you aspire to get him closest to, I believe he can. The accuracy thing is certainly a problem. Is he ever going to be one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league? No. Is he going to grow like Josh Allen? No. But some of the stuff is clean-upable. Now, drops count against every quarterback's completion percentage. So the people who just want to give him all catches for the drops are crazy. But the drops are going to go down at some point. And he's going to, if he's better trained by better coaches, I hate to be in the position to give the Titans the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving them some benefit of the doubt that the next offensive coaching staff and head coach are going to train him better. He's going to have a full offseason to have some of these bad habits beaten out of him, that he's going to throw fewer passes like the one to Chig that resulted in the interception behind him. And some of that accuracy will be better. He's not going to be a 50 to 55% passer. He's not going to be a 70% passer either, but he'll be, I think, an acceptable passer, completion percentage guy. Is the organization a dumpster fire? Absolutely. It's a dumpster fire. Now, is he the kind of guy that can help pull you out of dumpster fireness and make receivers better? I don't think Chim DK is the guy that we saw in the first quarter of that game. I think Cam Ward helped him look like that. I think Isle Manor, the good that we've seen of Isle Manor, is premature. I didn't expect his development that way. I think Cam Ward has helped him. I think he is capable in a way that no Titans quarterback has been probably since Steve McNair, maybe never in the Tennessee era, of elevating some receivers when he plays at the top of his game. Granted, your biggest point here is, are they capable of making a good hire? I have written and said, out of all the people over there, he's got the smallest sample size, Borgonzi, smallest sample size, highest trust factor to me. I want him leading the charge on this hire. I want Amy to come in, meet the guy for a cup of coffee, approve of it unless she's got some big reason not to, and get the hell back out of there and let it be Borgonzi and this guy, and that's your best hope.
Yeah, I saw that point you wrote last week, and I agree with it, but I just don't think that it's likely to happen. I mean, I think they're going to do what they've been doing, which is it's going to be a committee that's going to select the coach, and it's going to involve Amy and Kenneth and Barclay and Burke Nighhill and Chad Brinker and Borgonzi. And it's going to be, in my opinion, Bryce Wasserman. It's going to be the same group that picked the last coach with Outran Carthon and with Mike Borgonzi. And why would Chad Brinker give up the power that he somehow has and let his subordinate pick the head coach?
Here's why. Because it gives him plausible deniability. And the more he has plausible deniability, which he has on a lot of things, the safer he is. He's not technically responsible for a lot of things that have happened, which buys him increased time.
Here's what you said, though, about the Ward thing that I don't completely disagree with, but it bothers me a lot based on the decisions that were made by the organization. You are saying now at this point, hey, it'll take him some time with some good coaching, but he can develop into a tier 2 quarterback. And
high tier 2 quarterback. And with a high tier 2 quarterback, the quarterback that you, I think, have said is best in the league at some points, Sam Darnold, is a high tier 2 quarterback. If you love Sam Darnold, you can't bemoan Cam Ward's ceiling.
But my problem with that is, if that's what Cam Ward's ceiling is, then why didn't you trade the pick to the Giants and sign Sam Darnold?
Because I think they think Cam Ward's ceiling is better than Sam Darnold, and I agree. But given a young quarterback that you can mold and shape yourself, as opposed to a guy who's been through 3 programs, every team in the league is going to take the young guy you can shape yourself.
So I actually think we're going to see some changing of that, going forward. I think we're going to see some teams that are going to say, you know what, let's try to go for the guy that's been discarded because of the success of Mayfield, Darnold, Daniel Jones, etc. And the league's going to change in that way.
Well, there's certainly a new tier of that. I think if you have a more roster-ready team, you certainly want that, because they're switching places, right? That rookie class becomes that second time around class. And so it's a matter of where you are in the readiness. But somebody needs to have the Will Levises and the Cam Wards, if they go that route, to be ready for the second turn. Levis is certainly on that path, depending on his health and motivation.
What makes you think, though, that the Titans are going to be patient enough and smart enough to develop Ward? Because, again, with Mayfield and Darnold and Daniel Jones, this is year 6, year 7, year 8. And they're not going to give the number 1 overall pick in the draft 8 years to develop into a capable NFL starter. And so by year 3, they'll need to have an answer. And by year 3, it did look like Sam Darnold was kind of cheeks. It did look like Baker Mayfield had issues in Cleveland. They wanted Baker to be the guy so bad in year 2 when they went out and they stupidly, because it's Cleveland, got Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and made Freddie effing Kitchens the coach. And again, that's what the bad teams do. And the Titans keep doing things like the bad teams.
No, I mean, that's absolutely the concern, that even in a maybe not the best case Cam Ward scenario, but in the second best case Cam Ward scenario, they're getting him ready to go play somewhere else where he'll emerge, and he'll come out of a dysfunctional franchise like Darnold did, like Mayfield did, and go have success somewhere as a year 4, 5, 6 player. And everybody will say the things that they're saying about what the Jets couldn't do with Sam, and what the Browns couldn't do with Baker. And, and the Titans will be sitting at, a max of 9 and 8. But look, this team has cycled out of this before. I mean, we've looked a lot at the Ken Whisenhunt era, and fairly so. We haven't looked a lot at the Mike Mularkey's first year out of Whisenhunt, where they made a pretty substantial jump. And I think, and that roster wasn't very good. Mularkey did good work to getting the Titans to a baseline. And that's what they need out of this guy, is to be able to at least get them to a baseline of serviceable competitive play, where against all but the very best teams, and I'm not looking specifically at what Malarkey did, but I think that team against all but the very best teams, we thought they could win on a given week. But we don't feel at all like that now, right?
No, I mean, the thing that's crazy is, like, people have said to me, Peyton Manning, Jared, he had a terrible rookie year. And I actually went and looked it up. And the Colts had the 12th ranked offense in the NFL that year. The problem was they had the 29th ranked defense. And so what happened?
He turned the ball over a billion times.
Yeah, he led the league in passing. He threw 26 touchdowns. Cam's on pace for 10 touchdowns over 17 games. It's not an apples to apples comparison. And again, they had the 12th ranked offense in the league. Now he had Marshall Faulk at running back, and he had Marvin Harrison at wide receiver. And this team does not have Marshall Faulk, nor does it have Marvin Harrison. I guess the way I look at it is I'm like, a lot of this, I think the decision to take Cam was a poor decision because, again, Cam was, I think, kind of more of a project quarterback than the traditional 1-1 draft choice. And I look at what they could have gotten in the trade because you reported 2 1s and 2 2s was the deal that the Giants had offered, and that they could have built their team around a veteran-ish quarterback with those picks and then eventually drafted the quarterback. They could have done what Detroit did to build their team around Jared Goff. They could have done something like that. And instead, they drafted Cam because they thought Cam was Joe Burrow, Cam was Caleb Williams, Cam was this elite prospect. And one of the guys in the room that was pushing the decision to draft Cam has already been fired. And so now I'm asking those same guys that made the first mistake to now hire the right coach and build it the right way. And I just don't have a lot of faith in that.
Well, I don't think Brian Callahan had much clout in them choosing it. He said, yeah, give me a good young quarterback. But I do think I don't know that they thought he was Joe Burrow. They invoked Joe Burrow's name a lot because that was Brian Callahan's most recent experience. They don't have to think that he's Joe Montana in order to take him number one. You can get a lot out of a number one quarterback who's not, a generational number one quarterback still. I do think, and I've had this conversation with Braden on this very show, like, if they did what you wanted and traded out, and I was a trade out guy for a long time, but ultimately understood why they did what they did, you'd forestall the quarterback pick a year. I think what's likely to happen now is, and I don't know what the tiebreakers are, and it's way too early to look at them anyway. If they wind up here with the top 2, top 3 pick, which I think is very likely, they still can be in position to make that same kind of trade and do that stuff this year where they get that bounty of picks. And so they'll have the quarterback in place and then bring the stuff in behind him instead of doing it the other way. So then it's a matter of preference and a matter of Cam versus the second or third best quarterback in this draft. And we'll have a lot of fun with that when the time comes. It's too early for that, but they could wind up in the same place in terms of the numbers and the quality of picks over the 2 drafts. Now, and the problem becomes that you took Femi Oladejo in the second round, and he's completely a developmental. I mean, if you think Cam's a developmental guy, take a look at Femi.
Oladejo does give me, because this does kind of give me 2015 vibes where they drafted Mariota, and then the next year they traded the pick and they got all the picks in return and they built the team around that. And Oladejo does kind of give me Dorial Green Beckham, vibes.
Or Kevin Dodd.
This great project receiver we have is going to be awesome. And then obviously he was not. I do wonder how much of the turnovers, like just dropping the ball 2 weeks in a row, how much of that is because he's got small hands or because he's not focused? Or I heard you guys ask Mike McCoy about it yesterday, and Mike McCoy's answer was essentially, yep, Cam knows he can't do that, which I'm thinking, well, he probably knew he couldn't do that before he did it each of the last 2 times. That is a concern, and a lot of people are bringing up the hand size with Cam. What do you make of the fumbles and the unforced errors?
There was zero talk of Cam Ward's hand size before this draft as compared to Kenny Pickett, whose hands are, smaller, but not by that big a degree. So I am not a draftnik. I know people who spend, every waking hour of their day from the end of the season up until the draft and after, nitpicking every single thing. Why did I not hear about Cam Ward's hand size from them for how much we do this? I don't know. But I raise my hand every year and say, I'm an amateur at this, and I admit it. You guys watch film and claim to be experts, and I listen to those of you whose opinion I value. And a lot of you, I say, you don't know what you're talking about. But I would say to all of them, where was the conversation about Cam Ward's hand size? If this turns into a long-term thing, I'm going to say that more. I don't. It's just careless play, and he's a very kind of casual player, which can be a good thing in terms of he does not get flustered, which can be a very good thing. I'm not saying he should be flustered by this, but he should be going back to the lab and figuring out what the hell's going on. And you don't want him thinking about too much, but he needs to be thinking about holding on to the ball in those situations. I mean, those turnovers are just killer. I mean, that's a free touchdown in a game where they had a chance to compete. I need to note that in last show, we had two disagreements on Amy Adams Strunk being in the building, and I thought it would be a Patriots blowout, and you thought the Titans would win.
I did.
I don't know if it was a blowout. 18 points is pretty good handling, so certainly I was on the right side of that. And Amy was there, and Jared checked in with me if Amy was there or not, and I didn't even know he knew my Venmo, or he just knew that there wasn't another Paul Kuharsky out there, but he Venmoed me $20 very quickly. So very admirable and respectable.
Well, the last thing I wanted was you having
out there saying,
yeah, Jared Stillman doesn't pay his debts, that cheap ass. That was the, and Venmo does the thing where you can put in the 4 digits.
Oh, that's right.
How many Paul Kuharskys are out there with the same 4 digits of your phone number that have it that way? I will ask you last one on Ward, and then we'll get to some of the reaction here on the questions on Ward. How discouraged are you by the fact that, again, not an apples to apples comparison, but Jackson Dart is going out there and scoring 4 touchdowns in a game? And I know they lost, but Jackson Dart for the second week in a row absolutely played his ass off. And it is not even close, the comparison watching those two quarterbacks by where they are right now. And Dart went 24 picks after Ward.
He threw up some crazy shit during that game also, and got away with stuff. Look, right now, Jackson Dart's a better quarterback for sure. Again, it's a long game thing. I mean, we were sure after C.J. Stroud's rookie season that he was it, right? He was going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. What's he look like right now? I mean, Houston's an absolute mess. So if you're playing short game, Jackson Dart wins. Check with me in 3 years. And I know people can't even conceptualize the idea of waiting to judge a draft pick beyond right now, 7 games into the season. And Jackson Dart might be great, but I don't think there's anybody that coming out. Look, the Giants wanted to trade up to get who? Not to get Jackson Dart.
But the Giants are stupid, so that is something to keep in mind. That the Giants I don't think by the fact that the Titans were like the Giants offered this huge haul to get Cam Ward, which right now looks kind of stupid. The Titans said no, which right now maybe looks a little stupid. Again, it's the short game, but it does look kind of stupid. And so the saving grace for the Giants might be that the Titans did something stupid to counter their own stupidity.
I think if you surveyed 32 teams in the league, you would not find one that would have taken Jackson Dart ahead of Cam Ward.
If we surveyed 32 today.
Does that prove wrong? In the long term? Sure. Shit like that happens all the time. But let's not pretend like the short term is written in stone as the long term. See C.J. Stroud right now. See Jaden Daniels right now. I mean, you can look fantastic at certain points in time and not look fantastic later. And by the way, if you could choose, do you want to follow the course of C.J. Stroud or do you want to follow the course of Drake May?
I wanted May, like I was a May over Daniels guy going into last year's draft with everybody assuming Caleb was going to go number 1. I felt like an idiot last year when Daniels played the way that he played, and now May is playing better than Daniels. And I'm even saying, hold on, pump the brakes here for a second on Drake May, who looks the part, looks really good, but everybody came out of Sunday's game just on their knees for Drake May. And once Jeffrey Simmons went out of the game, I mean, he was playing, tackling 11 tackling dummies. out there with no pass rush and just stood in the pocket and just patted the football. So I can't use Sunday's performance.
Terrific throws. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed also was not present. Terrific throws. Terrific throws, terrific poise, did what he needed to do, missed 2 throws. I'm big on, like, he could only play who was out there.
No, I know.
Just like a guy can only play who he's with.
But I also am not like Nate Burleson sitting there saying, I didn't know he could pass the ball this well. And I'm like, at times last week, Geno Smith passed the ball that well. So that's one thing I'd keep in mind. I do want to get to some reaction on this. Jason says, none of Cam's flaws are bad decisions or lack of capability. I'm still all in on Cam. I think he's the guy. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, he's made some bad decisions. Look, Tyler Lockett didn't lend anything to the Titans, but wouldn't you agree, Jared? In early games, Tyler Lockett spent a lot of time open underneath for 7, 6, 8 yard gains that maybe he turns into, +3, +4 yak. And Cam Ward disregarded him to throw for something more difficult further down the field. And now Lockett's clearly been passed by DK, and so he bailed. I don't know that he's going to land anywhere good, but I think Cam Ward makes some questionable decisions. There was another play in this game. He threw to Gunnar Helm up the right side, who was kind of in triple coverage, overthrew him. DK was wide open in the flat with room to run. He does not like to accept the check down short stuff. He's a hunter, is what Callahan called him. Will that be good for him in the long run? Maybe. Is he missing out on chances to get some yards and get them into the 2nd and 8s, 2nd and 2s that they covet? Absolutely. And that's decision making.
Well, he's a home run hitter. He's going up there trying to hit the ball out of the park. He is not interested in singles and, again, a double he'll take, but his thing is not to try to slap the ball the other way. He's going to try to hit it out of the park. The one thing that bothers me is he says that none of those issues are big issues. I mean, the accuracy is an issue to me. Like, if you're going to be a great quarterback, you're going to have to be accurate with the football. And there was even one throw where they gained 9 yards on a pass to Gunnar Helm last week against New England, and I saw Blake wrote about this at your site in previous weeks about how Cam does not set his receivers up for success with the accuracy of his passes. Yep. And there was one to Helm that he threw on the sideline where Helm gained 9 yards, but if he puts the ball where it needs to be and Helm can catch it and run with it, Helm's going to run past Jack Gibbons. He's not faster than a lot of guys. He is faster than Jack Gibbons. And because Cam threw a bad ball, they only gained 9 yards. And I don't think that's going to change much over the course of his career.
See, I think that can change, like throwing it not on his left hip, on his right hip. I think that can change. The kind of accuracy that we're talking about in bigger picture stuff, he's not doing the Josh Allen improvement level stuff. And it's probably going to be an issue his whole career. He's just not going to be a high percentage guy. And these apologists that want to give him back the drops or give him back the throwaways don't realize if you're doing that for him, you're doing that for the whole league. There is a stat, completion percentage over expected, and he gains some points on that and still has a low completion percentage.
Jordan says, sounds like Jared thinks Cam will be a nurtured bust rather than a natured bust in his own undoing. I mean, isn't that kind of the case for most of the quarterbacks around the league, that a lot of these guys bust because their teams develop them shittily as opposed to just, oh yeah, Ryan Leaf, he sucks. Not to say that like Ryan Leaf was a nurtured bust. I think Ryan Leaf was crazy, but most of the guys that bust, in my opinion, bust because the team sets them up for failure or plays them too early or has bad coaching, or that's my vibe on it. I wonder what you think. And I think kind of the same thing for a lot of the guys who end up becoming great quarterbacks.
I mean, some of them are just shot. I don't think Jake Locker would have been good anywhere. I don't think he had the heart for it or the skills for it. Maybe that would have been different in a different environment, but the Titans sure as hell wanted him to succeed and invested all their energy in that. It wasn't the best coaching staff, but also they've had worse. So I think some guys just are misses,
Sure.
just like at any position. But yeah, I mean, you look around, Darnold is a great example. Mayfield is a great example. If you end up in a shit situation, you're swimming upstream and you get to a better place and the tide pushes you along. And the difference between going against the tide and going with the tide is enormous in terms of determining your success or failure.
Rex Road and I have this had this big argument one time. So I think that in my lifetime, there are two quarterbacks that have gone to bad organizations and have essentially elevated the organization. And the second that they walk out the door, the organization will, and I'm talking about number one picks. Obviously, Brady, elevated the Patriots, but that was probably pure luck as much as anything else. To me, that was Peyton Manning and Joe Burrow, where they went to bad organizations, bad owners, bad teams that earned the number one pick. And because they were so great, they kind of turned those organizations around. And the Bengals stink without Joe Burrow, and the Colts were awful without Manning.
Andrew Luck was pretty good in succession, but when Manning was down, hurt, yeah, they were terrible. Somebody saying Rosen too. I mean, Rosen was an absolute bust. He didn't go anywhere and do anything.
Total
that was a terrible pick.
But I think my thing was we argued about Mahomes, and I'm like, Mahomes went to the best coach with the fastest receiver in the league, which is perfect for his skill set, the best tight end in the league, the number one pick at left tackle, and he sat the bench for a year behind Alex Smith. It was the perfect situation built by Kansas City. They targeted the guy. They knew what his strengths were, knew what he needed to work on. They gave him time to work on it, and Mahomes was then unleashed on the league, and Joe Rexrode thinks that Mahomes could have gone anywhere and would be Mahomes.
Well, I mean, that was the ideal scenario. Now, how Mahomes came into another team, could he have fixed the Jets immediately? I think that makes for an interesting conversation. I think Mahomes would have been a very good quarterback ultimately, but could Cleveland have worked to screw him up? The Jets? Who knows? I mean, they've done it to
the Raiders.
Yeah.
The Titans.
I think ultimately he would have been good, but it would have taken some time and he would have had to fight upstream and ownership would have had to come around. A lot of things would have had to have fallen in place for him. Certainly he had the ideal situation and God bless him for his luck.
Number two, Kayshon Boutte, the wide receiver, caught the big touchdown for the Patriots after the game, said, quote, "We took advantage of lazy cornerback play, lazy safety play." And Mike McCoy was asked by you guys about it yesterday, and Mike McCoy said he disagrees with it. The idea that there was lazy corner and safety play, just like he disagreed with Jeffrey Simmons' assessment of practice the week prior, just like I guess they disagreed with what Michael Pittman said after the Colts game. And we also had that quote in The Athletic of the Raiders coach saying that the Titans are the worst team he's seen in 25 years. PK, what do you make of the Kayshon Boutte allegations that Mike McCoy vehemently denied yesterday?
I mean, it's hard to watch L'Jarius Sneed's performance in that game and think it was what's the opposite of lazy. It wasn't a super energetic performance when Boutte ran by him in kind of three stages, like you're ahead of me, I'm even with you, I'm blown past you, I've got a touchdown pass in my arms. And Sneed got beat on the other touchdown where he hesitated a little bit. He got himself in pretty good position. It was a great catch, but in the corner, but not excellent coverage. There was another pass up the left sideline, relatively, maybe 12-yard gain against Sneed. Sneed was terrible. And then it's hard not to think, and I never think guys are faking injuries, and I'm sure he's hurt to some degree, but it was a very conveniently timed bow out by L'Jarius Sneed in that game. It didn't look like a very good effort on those plays by the Titans defensive backs, particularly Sneed. So, these critiques, the losing team is always going to say, well, the winning team could say whatever they want. Well, I don't think these guys are just throwing around nonsense out of nowhere. Now, I do think the effort thing gets thrown around a little bit. I mean, I don't think the Titans are playing with no effort. I think the Titans are a bad football team that doesn't have good players, and those bad players some of whom are supposed to be good, are getting their asses kicked.
So my biggest issue was I've seen some really shitty Titans teams in my life, and I don't remember this amount of after the game players saying, man, that team, they were lazy. That team, they weren't ready to play. That team, they weren't. Now, you've covered this well more than I do. I mean, you're in those locker rooms, and not that you're in the visitors' locker rooms, although sometimes I'm sure you are, but have you ever seen this much questioning of the Titans' effort? And especially Snead. What bothers me about that is they traded away Jarvis Brownlee because I guess he was not professional enough for them, but they have Snead out there, and it looks like Snead is taking plays off and getting called out by the other team for it, but Jarvis Brownlee goes to the Jets, and apparently he's a solid player for them, though they stink too.
Yeah, that move's not looking very good in terms of what goes on for 3 hours and 15 minutes on Sunday afternoons, for sure.
And his replacement, number 18, Jalen Armour-Davis, he sucks.
Yeah, he's not getting it done at all. They're they needed to be good in the secondary because they're not very good up front. Now Ward is playing pretty well up front, and Draymond Jones has finally come to life. I think those are Titans' two best trade chips, by the way. If they're going to be bad, they can be bad without Ward and without Draymond Jones, who could bring something in return. But the corners, are not getting the job done. I don't know if lazy is the right word, but certainly teams are not hesitating to critique the Titans, and you can't fight it very hard. I mean, you could say what Mike McCoy said because it's your obligation, but if the play matches up with what the accusations are, it's hard to put up much of a fight.
Well, and how do you have a team where you're paying Snead $17 million and he's not giving his all, and in the same team you got rid of Jarvis Brownlee because you said that he wasn't professional enough or he wasn't disciplined enough, so you got rid of Jarvis Brownlee for a bag of footballs? I mean, again, a pick swap from the 7th to the 6th is really nothing. I mean, at that point, you're talking undrafted free agent caliber players anyways. So the pick swap to the 6th is nothing to get rid of Brownlee. So it's almost like Brownlee is not good enough to be in this locker room. But on the other side, L'Jarius Snead is good enough to be in this locker room, and he's lazy as shit and allegedly shooting up car dealerships while he's on IR.
Yeah, and they just to be clear, that allegation shifted to him watching his friend do it and not saying anything about it. Matt Mosley points out here in the comments that Jets are getting to play Jarvis in the slot. The Titans were playing him outside, and that's a good point. I haven't seen the Jets. The Titans did consider him a slot. Obviously, they've got McCreary, who they like more than him. We'll see if they sign McCreary to a longer-term deal or if they're going to be shopping for a slot again. They're at the point, Jared, where guys like Chig, who I don't love, McCreary, who's good but not great, if they let these guys go, they just create more need. Yeah. And this team creating more need is insane because their need list is so incredibly long. It's crazy. So they're going to be major shoppers after this season, and it's going to extend well beyond the draft.
That reminds me of David Quessenberry when he played right tackle and he had an RFA tender and they didn't tender him a deal. And the RFA tender is like $2 million. And it's like, well, David Quessenberry did play right tackle for them, but he wasn't very good. And it's like, but he was at least there. Like he started and you won. So at least he can kind of play. The second you let a guy like that leave, now you have to go replace him. And it's easy to do that when, hey, we've got Travis Kelce in his prime on this team who can make up for a lot of mistakes here. We've got Myles Garrett, on defense who can make up for a lot of holes that we can plug in with average players on defense. The Titans don't have any of those players.
Yeah, get the body in camp. Get the body in camp. And I think McCreary and Chig, and I think that Chig, yards after the catch, is one of the best things they have going for them. And, Chig's got some deficiencies for sure. But I think they've underused him. And then they finally go to Helm in this game and they don't find Chig at all. you can use both. You can use both, particularly with Ridley out. Bryce Oliver, they need to come back. He's no star, but he's a guy that they thought could be NWI-ish, and they could use an NWI-ish reliable receiver in that mix now. And I wouldn't be surprised if once he resurfaces, he could give him a little in the wide receiving core.
I can't stand Chig because I think he drops the ball too much. But
he does.
At the same time, when Mike McCoy was talking players, not plays last week, and they start throwing the ball to Chimere Dike, who is one of the only guys on the team that can run, I'm like, good. This seems like a good philosophy. We're going to get the ball in the hands of the guys that can actually run. And there aren't a lot of guys on this team who can run, so let's get it to DK. Well, the other guy on the team who can really run is Chig. And I kept waiting for them to get the ball to Chig so that Chig could run, and then they never got the ball to Chig last week. And I don't know if that was Chig's fault or if that was Cam's fault or if that was the game plan's fault. But if you're going to be players, not plays, and you've got two guys who can run with Ridley hurt, you need to get those two guys the ball.
Yeah, and another thing that throwing the ball to Chim does, it takes him out of blocking situations. All these screens that we've seen that were so terrible, and they ran a nice, slow developing one for 12 yards, but they got Chim in blocking situations on screen. If you're putting players in position to do what they do well, Chim does not block well. He's a slider guy who's fast. So don't put him in position to block for somebody else on screen.
PK, what did you make of Mike McCoy after a week? He had, his standard media availabilities, and then he coached the game. I thought one of the stupidest, Brian Callahan level ridiculous at the end of the first half with all 3 timeouts in 40 seconds and the Patriots getting the ball on the other side. And then if you're going to run the clock out, run the clock out. But they didn't. They ended up, essentially running the clock out, but they tried not to go for it. Yesterday, his explanation was the wind. The wind was a factor.
A 50-yard field goal into the same wind. I asked him if was the wind dramatically different. He said, it was gusting now. It was gusting. Look, every chance you get to go try to score points, you've got to try. He basically, reading between the lines, his answer was, I had no confidence in the offense. And I was scared that their defense was gonna score. I had no confidence that their offense was going to score. I had no confidence in our defense. No confidence in the offense, no confidence in the defense. We had to get the hell out of there. And this fear is the reason that the Titans have no chance of springing an upset. They got to go into one game this year, and say, we're not going to play afraid here. If we make more mistakes, we'll lose by 30 instead of 20. But we're going to push. And if there are 3 points that we might be able to get, we're going to go get it. And instead of thinking what's going to happen here is our offense is going to turn the ball over and the defense is going to score, or we're going to punt and then we're going to give up another big play. I mean, look, those things might be true, but what kind of mentality is that? What does that say to your team? We're not going to put ourselves in a situation where we might have to punt inside 39 seconds because we think you're going to give up a big play.
I agree. I mean, I heard that response about the wind, and I thought to myself, I'd rather McCoy just have the balls and say, hey, I wanted to get to the locker room down 4 because I was afraid that the quarterback was going to drop back, drop the ball. They were going to pick it up and run into the end zone for a touchdown. I'd rather Mike McCoy say that than say it was the wind.
Yeah, he doesn't have to say the last part. He could just say, I wanted to get in at 4 and regroup. But, I mean, that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And Mike McCoy is, as an interim coach, you come in and you loosen, and he's coming in and tightening. And I can't see how, I don't know. He's tightened things up with us, and I don't see how that isn't reflective of some degree of tightening things up.
How's he tighten things up with the media?
It says nothing, not offering any hints of injury stuff. Basically, we tried to introduce ourselves to him on Friday when things had calmed down. He couldn't have given less of a shit who was who.
That is, I had a serious thought during the game when I saw how Mike McCoy approached the 2-minute drill before the half. and I mean this with all due respect to Brian Callahan, who I liked as a guy, just thought he was a terrible coach. I'm not sure he hired a single coach on that staff with a brain cell, because maybe his dad is the offensive line coach, but I hate to paint an entire staff with a broad brush, but between last year listening to Denard Wilson's excuses, and I'll never forget when he said, hey, when we heat up, Arden Key'll heat up. And you had to say, well, but isn't one of the reasons why you'll heat up is because Arden Key will get you to heat up? And he really didn't have much of an answer for that. So ever since the Denard Wilson bullshit last year, I really haven't been able to take him seriously. Colt Anderson was Brian Callahan's handpicked choice for special teams coach. And that was not only a disaster, his press conferences were a joke, just abysmal. And so I'm watching the game and I'm watching this coach before the half, and I am truly wondering, outside of Bones Fossil, has Brian Callahan hired the worst staff in the history of the NFL, or the dumbest staff in the history of the NFL, which is probably why everybody was telling Brian, hey, Brian, you're doing a great job.
It's not the best staff. There are some guys on there that are brighter than you're giving them credit for.
Nick Holtz and Todd Downing walking together like buddies before the game.
I got a picture of them shaking hands as they
were they like, hey man, we're gonna walk around the field together, and Twitter will have a fucking field day with it. Like, what were they? Oh my god! And what Holtz? Did you see the Albert Breer story where they said why not have Holtz call the plays instead of Hardigree? And somebody said, well, Holtz isn't ready. It's like, so Brian Callahan hired an offensive coordinator who's not ready to call plays. How does this happen?
Well, I mean, on the other side of it, Brian Callahan had no intention of anybody else on his staff ever needing to call plays, because he was going to be the play caller. And so a year and 5 or 6 games into the season, or when did they change it? A year and 3 games into the season, he never imagined that they'd be looking for a new play caller.
What's crazy is that I believe the Titans are going to do what they did last time, which is they went out and hired a coach who was the exact opposite of the coach they just fired. And so I think they're going to go out and try to hire a coach who's the exact opposite of Callahan, which in theory I'm not totally against, but they're going to shut themselves out from all the coordinators that are out there. And I'm not saying that I'm against a coach with experience, but I'm against the idea of saying, no, I don't want a coach with experience. I want the young hotshot coordinator. And I'm also against shutting yourself out to a young coordinator, because there are great coaches in this league that are on their second tries. And there are great coaches in this league like Sean McVay, who was a hotshot coordinator and interviewed well and got the job. And I'm just convinced that because Callahan was such a disaster, they are now going to go with an experienced guy. To me, it's going to be one of 4 guys. And Mike McCoy may have cost himself the job with that 2-minute drill before the half. I don't know. It's going to be one of Mike McCarthy, Matt Nagy, or Arthur Smith, and maybe Mike McCoy if somehow he ingratiates himself to Amy the way Mike Mularkey and Chad Brinker have.
I am completely against Mike McCoy. You have the whole world, not just because he's been a jerk so far, but you have the whole world of coaching candidates available to you, and you're going to stay in-house with Brian Callahan's mentor. It's just inconceivable.
But she's done it before.
Yeah.
Not that Mularkey was a bad coach, but
one time, and that's the only coach she knew, and she was new at it. The world has to expand for her. I think that they just need to talk to a lot of people. You talk to a lot of people to get their opinions on Cam Ward and everything. I do think that the offensive coordinator pool, like the hot young offensive coordinator pool, has kind of dried up. Like those guys have all been hired, and it hasn't had a great chance to replenish itself. So one reason that you maybe can't go that route again, not just out of fear, is because there aren't as many good candidates. I like the Sala, Mike McDaniel pairing potentially. He's a good friend with Miami's coach who's going to get fired. If you could get him as an offensive coordinator, that would be terrific. I'm intrigued by Flores, though I think the legal issue is a problem. But I think maybe a defensive head coach could be the best guy available. And I wonder if they'd be reluctant to do that. It sounds like, from what's been reported, and all these conversations, of course, take place with national guys somehow as soon as there's a job open, that they're going to be open to everything. So, that's their intent anyway.
If you were the head odds maker at the Las Jared Sportsbook and Casino, and I were to say, Paul, give me the favorite on the board to be the next Titans coach, not who's Paul's favorite, but what would you put as the betting favorite right now? Just your gut, your betting favorite to be the next coach of the Titans.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard not to put McCarthy there, but these guys worked with McCarthy. Does it mean they love McCarthy? Maybe they worked with McCarthy and they didn't like McCarthy. So it's a easy dot connection, but we don't know. We don't know if Borgonzi liked Nagy or if he didn't like Nagy, or if he likes him as a coordinator, but not as a head coach. So the dot connecting is dangerous. Arthur Smith, I think, definitely probably has a relationship with Amy, having been here and through as many coaching changes as he endured. So that would definitely work in his favor. You'd have to ask him a lot of questions about his personnel use during his time in Atlanta, which is the big question about him. But I do think he'd give them, be smart. He's a smart guy. He would be smart enough to know that he needed to establish an identity, which is something the Titans haven't had since Vrabel left.
So Matt says on the chat, Clark Lee, and I know you're going to scoff at that. And I
think he's an excellent coach, but I think just somebody that, did he work in the NFL at some point early?
I don't think he's ever worked in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's dangerous.
But I would, if to your point about talking to a lot of people, I think I probably would interview him and just see, hey, what's your plan? If you were to take over the Titans, what's your plan? And he may just be using that to get a raise from Vandy, though he probably doesn't need the Titans to get a raise from Vandy, because every college in the country is probably going to want to bring in the guy who made Vanderbilt decent. And I think he'd be nuts if he were to leave. But I think it's going to be one of probably those three between McCarthy, Nagy, and Arthur. I think it's going to be one of the three.
He's also Clark Lee's tight with Callahan, so that might make it sticky.
So I do wonder, speaking of Clark Lee, and the reason I brought that up is because Paul, Vanderbilt is 6-1 for the first time since 1950. So I was watching the game with my dad and my son when Vanderbilt beat LSU. Did you watch the Vandy LSU game on Saturday?
Was your son very attentive to this game?
My son, with his giant club cast and his other hand, was playing with one of the 8,000 toys that my mom has bought for him. And he was not paying much of attention. In fact, I think he fell asleep for most of it. But
I did not have a chance to watch the game, but I was keeping my son was playing baseball, but I was keeping my eye on the scoreboard. I'm thrilled for Vanderbilt. I pull for Vanderbilt. That's my SEC interest as the hometown school and as the smart SEC school. I root for it. It's been largely fruitless, obviously, since I've moved here in 1997. And so I'm thrilled to see him. And it's so much more than Pavia. I mean, they are a legitimate roster up and down. When you're beating LSU in the trenches, you're legit. And I want to see this thing go as far as it can and be as big of a national story as it deserves to be.
I do wonder this, though. So as I was watching the game, Vanderbilt hasn't been 6-1 since 1950. My dad was born in 1951, and my son was born in 2024, and it hit me that for the entire life that my dad has lived, Vanderbilt's never been this good. And for the entire brief life that my son has lived, Vanderbilt has never been a joke in his lifetime. I do wonder how much of this is, wow, look at what they've done at Vanderbilt. Way to go, Clark Lee, you genius. Way to go, Vanderbilt. And how much of it is, well, they changed the rules and now they're paying the players. And because they're paying the players, Vanderbilt, and we have to give Vanderbilt credit because I think in some previous administrations and lifetimes, Vanderbilt would have not wanted to pay the football players. But it's like, yeah, Vanderbilt didn't change anything. They just started paying the players because you can now pay the players, and that's why Vandy's good.
Yeah, but do we think Vanderbilt's pay scale? I'm sure there's some numbers out there that we could do this research, but is Vanderbilt's pay scale ever going to be on par with public schools that are eight times the size of them or more?
So 2 years ago, when FSU and Clemson started raising holy hell about how the ACC wasn't making enough money, I was talking to my buddy who's the AD at Louisville, and I was like, I am so tired of hearing the bitching from Clemson and Florida State, because you are not going to convince me that even if Vanderbilt has an SEC check and they have an ACC check, that Vanderbilt's going to have a better program than them. And I mean, I hate to say it, but Vanderbilt's better than Clemson and Florida State. And so I think it's that SEC check where schools would have to pay their coaches or build their facilities off of the booster money. Now they take the SEC check and they can pay their coaches and build their facilities, and they turn to their boosters and they say, okay, now write us a check for the players. And in Vanderbilt's case, and Joe Rexroad actually reported this on the front end a couple of years ago, Vanderbilt does have some serious NIL money and serious NIL boosters. And I think that is what has kind of led Vanderbilt to having a roster where they can compete with LSU in the trenches.
That's, I mean, hey, if the rules have changed in a way that finally favors Vanderbilt, more power to Vanderbilt. I don't think anybody, when the rules were changing, said, hey, you know what's going to happen out of this? Is that a school like Vanderbilt's going to get good. I don't think any of us were thinking that, right? So if it's a nice side effect of this thing, hallelujah.
What I can't get over is the fact that Arkansas has always had money. Arkansas has got the Walmart family right there, and they've got, there's some other, Tyson Chicken. I mean, they've got big ass boosters. Arkansas has been spending money for years, and they still fucking stink. And yet Vandy apparently is, once they start spending money, all of a sudden they're good. Do you think that this Vanderbilt thing is, and they're going to host College Game Day this week, they're going to beat Kentucky, who stinks. Texas, shockingly, stinks. And they're going to beat Texas, I would think. And they're probably going to beat Auburn, who also stinks, which means they would need to win one of the Missouri or Tennessee games in order to have a 10-win season and make the playoffs. Do you think, and I know you didn't watch the game, and I know you're not a college football savant, but you are a common sense guy, albeit sometimes I think that fleets you when you get angry at me. But do you think Vanderbilt has a legitimate shot to make it to the playoff, or do you think this is just a good story because little old Vanderbilt beat LSU in a 6-1?
I mean, it's really hard to take them from where they've been, even at their best, even in the trajectory that Clark Lee's had them on, all the way to the playoff. But give me that list again. Missouri.
So Missouri and Tennessee, they have to win one of those two. And then they have to beat Kentucky, who stinks, Auburn, who stinks, and Texas, who shockingly stinks.
My concern would be more with a blip against one of those three, Kentucky, Auburn, and Texas. Maybe mostly Texas. I think they split with Missouri and Tennessee easy. I think they could sweep those two from my vantage point.
I mean, one game they
I worry about a blip.
The one game they lost was Bama. And in the Bama game, I thought I watched Bama play Vanderbilt. I watched Bama play UT. And I thought that Vanderbilt, not to say that always matters of like, well, they played them and they played them, but just, comparison. I thought Vanderbilt played Bama tougher than Tennessee did. And I thought Vanderbilt lost the Bama game because of unforced errors on Pavia's part. And Pavia played much better against LSU. And I would agree with you. I think they can say what the line would be if they were setting the odds for Vanderbilt, Texas in a couple of weeks. The game is at Texas. Joe thinks Texas will be favored minus like 1.5. Caroline thinks Vanderbilt will be favored by 2.5.
I think that's a hell of an interesting game. And right now, every Vanderbilt game is an interesting game. And I think that extends beyond Nashville. And we haven't said that about many individual Vanderbilt games. Better yet, a slate of what? 5? It's an incredible time, right?
It's amazing that Vanderbilt games are they're having college game day this week. And we know that the UT game will be big because that may be for a spot in the playoff. And we're talking about Texas, who's going to be favored, Vanderbilt or Texas, which is crazy. But then it's like, well, hey, that Auburn game is a big game, not because Auburn sucks and nobody cares about Auburn, but that big game is a big game because Vanderbilt might screw up their season by losing to Auburn, where usually the Vanderbilt games are bigger games for the other team because they might screw up their season by losing to Vandy.
Yeah, we need Vandy, Tennessee to be for a spot in the playoffs. I mean, that would be absolutely terrific. And I fear that I'm in flight during that game now that I'm thinking about my schedule. So that
you should change. Would you change your flight? If Vandy, Tennessee.
What's the date of that game?
It's like the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm flying with my family back from New Jersey. That's not changeable.
That's a tough one because I know there's nobody.
Maybe I'll have it on the plane.
I know there's nobody who likes to poke the bear of the Tennessee fans like Paul Kuharsky used to back in the day. So that was especially when there's a UT player that the Titans might draft.
It's just that they think that they've had like the last 20 years is still part of their winning tradition when it's just not.
PK, great show. Thank you to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and to Sinker's Beverages. Braden will be back with PK next week. As PK said last week, if you want the Stilly and Paulie show full time.
Paulie and Stilly show. We go by seniority.
I don't think we do. I think that Joe called it the Stilly and Paulie show, and I think that was the first way. Plus, I'm the lead-in Mike guy. You're the second Mike guy. I think it should be Stilly and Paulie.
He thinks it sounds better, but I'm going to stand my ground. The Paulie and Stilly show.
If you sponsor the Paulie and Stilly show and you get the Stilly and Paulie show, you can pick whose name goes first. But that is a possibility.
Quite an audience.
PK, take care of yourself.
This Stilly, who's actually listenable.
PK, take care of yourself.
Good stuff. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks.